Welcome, dear listener, to another calm and cozy journey with Sleepy Time History, where the past unfolds gently and bedtime becomes a portal to wonder. Tonight, we travel to the land of ancient pyramids and vibrant traditions, sun-drenched landscapes and revolutionary spirit, the remarkable country of Mexico. From the first peoples who gazed at the stars above Teotihuacan, to the empires that rose and fell, the conquistadors who came by sea, and the freedom fighters who answered with courage. Mexico's story is as rich and layered as its woven textiles and colorful murals. We'll walk through jungles where the Maya built their temples, float through canals once engineered by the Aztecs, and listen to whispers of revolution echoing from desert hills. Through joy and sorrow, resistance and rebirth, we'll explore how this land of poetry and passion continues to shape its future with deep roots and enduring dreams. So tuck yourself in, let your thoughts drift like a paper lantern on a quiet lake, and come with us now, as we begin the dreamy tale of Mexico. Long before pyramids pierced the skies of Teotihuacan, before the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan shimmered across the waters of Lake Texcoco, and even before the Maya carved their glyphs into the jungle stone, the story of Mexico began quietly, whispered through forests, deserts, and fertile valleys. Tonight, we drift back into the deepest chapters of time, where the roots of one of the world's most storied civilizations took hold. Let your eyes grow heavy, and your mind grow still, as we journey to the land that would one day be called Mexico, to its distant beginnings. The arrival of the first peoples. Tens of thousands of years ago, during the last ice age, sea levels were lower, and a vast land bridge connected what is now eastern Russia to Alaska. Across this bridge, known as Beringia, early human groups slowly made their way into the Americas. These intrepid travelers followed game herds, moving gradually southward into unfamiliar landscapes. By around 12,000 BCE, small bands of hunter-gatherers had arrived in the region that would one day become Mexico. For many generations, life was nomadic. People hunted giant animals like mammoths and mastodons, fished in rivers, and gathered roots, nuts, and fruit. Evidence from sites like Tlapacoya, near modern-day Mexico City, and Tepexpan, in the Valley of Mexico, offer glimpses into these earliest communities. At Tlapacoya, stone tools and ancient hearths reveal a world of resourcefulness, where people adapted skillfully to their environment. As the climate warmed and the Ice Age came to a close, the great beasts began to disappear. Human groups turned increasingly to smaller animals and plant foods, setting the stage for a transformative development in human history: agriculture. The birth of agriculture in Mesoamerica. Around 7000 BCE, along the southern reaches of what is now Mexico, particularly in regions like the Tehuacan Valley and the Valley of Oaxaca, people began domesticating plants. Among the earliest was teosinte, a wild grass that would eventually evolve into maize, or corn. This shift toward farming was slow but profound. Over thousands of years, through careful selection and cultivation, maize became a reliable food source, joined by beans, squash, chili peppers, and avocados, forming the foundation of the Mesoamerican triad. These staples provided not just sustenance, but a new way of life. With steady food supplies, people could settle in one place, and over time, communities grew. By 3000 BCE, village life had become more common. Families built homes from clay and thatch. pottery began to appear, smooth, hand-shaped vessels used for storing grain, cooking food, and carrying water. This was the dawn of settled civilization in Mexico. Early cultural foundations. As centuries passed, these early farming villages grew in size and complexity. People built ceremonial centers, developed early religious beliefs, and began crafting stone tools and figurines with increasing skill. One of the most intriguing cultures from this formative era is the Tlatilco people, who lived in the Valley of Mexico around 1200 BCE. Tlatilco pottery often depicted dual-faced figures, possibly representing themes of life and death, duality, or balance. These early signs of spiritual thinking foreshadowed the deeply symbolic worldviews that would later define Mesoamerican civilizations. Further south, in what is now Guerrero and Oaxaca, the Chupacuaro culture emerged. These communities produced intricate painted ceramics and developed early burial practices, indicating growing social and spiritual organization. The rise of the Olmec, the first civilization. By around 1600 BCE, on the Gulf Coast of present-day Veracruz and Tabasco, a remarkable civilization began to flourish, the Olmecs. Often referred to as the mother culture of Mesoamerica, the Olmec were not the first people in the region, but they were among the first to build cities, carve colossal art, and establish the cultural building blocks that many later civilizations would adopt and refine. At sites like San Lorenzo, La Venta, and Tres Zapotes, the Olmecs constructed large ceremonial centers complete with temples, plazas, and pyramids. Their most iconic creations were the colossal stone heads, carved from basalt and weighing up to 20 tons. Each head bore a distinct expression and headdress, possibly representing rulers or important ancestors. The Olmec also developed early writing systems, complex calendars, and religious rituals involving jaguars, serpents, and deities linked to rain and fertility. Maize was central not only to their diet but to their cosmology. It was seen as a sacred gift, the very substance from which humans had been created, according to later Mesoamerican mythologies. Knowledge carried forward. As the Olmec influence spread, their ideas, technologies, and religious practices radiated outward, touching future cultures like the Maya and the Zapotec. Trade routes connected coastal regions to highland valleys, allowing obsidian, jade, cacao, and knowledge to circulate. In the highlands of Oaxaca, the Zapotecs began to form their own centers of power. By around 500 BCE, they had established the city of Monte Alban, a hilltop metropolis that would become one of Mesoamerica's great early cities. Though this belongs to a later chapter, its roots trace directly back to the developments of this distant era. Sacred landscapes and early beliefs. Across ancient Mexico, people began to see the landscape itself as sacred. Mountains were revered as the homes of gods. Caves were seen as entrances to the underworld. Rivers, lakes, and fertile valleys were gifts from nature's spirits and deities. This reverence for nature, and the cycles of life, death, and rebirth, would become a cornerstone of later Mesoamerican religions. By studying the stars, the sun, and the moon, early astronomer priests tracked the passing of seasons. Calendars were born, systems of timekeeping that tied agriculture to ceremony, and humans to the cosmos. A world in motion. By the end of this early period, roughly around 400 BCE, The peoples of ancient Mexico had transformed their world. They had moved from wandering bands to settled farmers, from simple villages to ceremonial centers, from stone tools to monumental art. They had begun to shape the land not only with crops and clay, but with imagination and meaning. These distant beginnings, quiet, determined, and filled with wonder, laid the foundation for everything that would follow. The grand cities, mighty empires, and enduring traditions of Mexico were already taking root. And so, as we prepare to move forward into the age of ancient civilizations, we pause to honor these early peoples. Their footsteps echo softly beneath the soil of modern Mexico. Their legacy lives in language, custom, and spirit. As we continue drifting through the centuries of Mexico's rich past, the quiet stirrings of its early agricultural peoples give way to the grand civilizations that rose from forest, valley, and plateau. These were cultures that mastered stone and sky, architects of cities aligned with stars, storytellers who carved myths into glyphs, and philosophers who mapped the heavens with mathematics and ritual. Close your eyes and allow the gentle hush of time to carry you deeper, to the world of ancient Mexico, where pyramids reached toward the gods and calendars charted the dance of time. The Olmecs, legacy of the mother culture. Though introduced in our last segment, the Olmecs continued to flourish into this new era, especially between 1200 BCE and 400 BCE. Their cities like La Venta reached their peak, showcasing sophisticated urban planning, religious centers, and iconic monuments. The Olmecs laid the foundation for many features we now associate with Mesoamerican civilization, from ceremonial ballgames and sacred pyramids to a fascination with jaguar deities and duality in human nature. Their influence radiated through trade and cultural diffusion. Obsidian from the highlands, cacao from tropical regions, and precious jade from the south were exchanged across vast distances. Though the Olmec civilization eventually declined, their spiritual and intellectual legacy would echo through the ages. The Zapotecs, builders of Monte Alban. High atop a flattened mountain ridge in the valley of Oaxaca, the Zapotec people began building one of Mesoamerica's earliest urban centers, Monte Alban. Founded around 500 BCE, Monte Alban grew into a remarkable city, complete with grand plazas, pyramids, temples, tombs, and even one of the earliest known ball courts. The Zapotec developed one of Mesoamerica's first writing systems, using glyphs carved into stone to record names, dates, and rituals. They also created a 260-day ritual calendar, one that aligned with the spiritual cycles of life, harvest, and divine influence. Monte Alban thrived for over 1,000 years, standing watch over the valley below like a sentinel of stone and sky. The Zapotecs' careful urban planning and religious architecture would inspire cultures across the region. The Maya, masters of time and cosmos. To the southeast, in the dense rainforests of what is now Chiapas, Yucatan, and Guatemala, the Maya civilization reached dazzling heights. Though often associated with Central America, many of the most important Maya cities and achievements occurred within modern-day Mexico. The Maya civilization began forming around 2000 BCE, but its classic period, from roughly 250 to 900 CE, marks its golden age. Cities like Palenque, Calakmul, Bonampak, and Yaxchilan rose among the trees, each one filled with towering temples, intricate palaces, ceremonial plazas, and observatories carved from limestone. The Maya developed an advanced writing system, composed of over 800 glyphs, used to inscribe historical records, mythology, and royal lineages on stelae, pottery, and codices. Their understanding of mathematics included the use of zero, a concept rare in the ancient world, and their astronomy allowed them to predict eclipses, solstices, and planetary alignments with astonishing precision. Maya priests tracked the movements of Venus and the moon, aligning major rituals and city layouts with celestial events. Their calendar systems, particularly the long count, which measured great cycles of time, reflected a worldview in which time itself was sacred. The Maya pantheon was rich and layered, filled with gods of rain, maize, sun, and the underworld. Rulers were seen as intermediaries between the earthly and divine, conducting rituals to maintain cosmic balance. Teotihuacan, City of the Gods. Far to the north, in the high central plateau of the Valley of Mexico, rose a city so grand, so mysterious, that the later Aztecs would call it Teotihuacan, the place where the gods were created. Founded around 200 BCE and reaching its peak between 100 and 600 CE, Teotihuacan was one of the largest cities in the world at its height, home to an estimated 100,000 to 200,000 people. Its wide Avenue of the Dead was lined with immense structures, including the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon, both still standing in awe-inspiring silence today. Teotihuacan was carefully planned with a grid system and featured apartment compounds, workshops, markets, and massive plazas. The city's art, featuring feathered serpents and fire deities, revealed a complex religion centered around fertility, sacrifice, and cosmic cycles. Despite its size and influence, the identity of Teotihuacan's original builders remains elusive. Unlike the Maya, they left no detailed glyphic records, but their architecture and cultural footprint spread widely, from the Gulf Coast to the Maya lowlands. Teotihuacan's decline around 750 CE remains a mystery, though internal unrest, environmental stress, or invasion may have played a role. Still, its memory loomed large, and it was revered by later peoples, including the Aztecs, as a sacred place of origins. The Toltecs, myth and memory. As Teotihuacan faded, a new power rose in central Mexico. The Toltecs, whose capital at Tula flourished around 900 to 1150 CE. The Toltecs were seen by later Mesoamerican cultures, especially the Aztecs, as wise artisans and sages, guardians of ancient knowledge and sacred balance. Tula featured grand plazas, pyramid temples, and carved stone columns in the form of warrior figures, known as Atlanteans. These imposing statues, with butterfly chest plates and feathered helmets, symbolized the martial and sacred values of Toltec society. The Toltec ruler Suacatl Quetzalcoatl became a legendary figure, both historical and divine. According to lore, he opposed human sacrifice and favored peace and wisdom. After being overthrown, he journeyed east and vanished, promising to return, a myth that would echo ominously during the arrival of the Spanish. The Toltecs' influence on religion, art, and social organization was significant, even as their power waned in the face of internal strife and new migrations. Other regional powers. Across ancient Mexico, other civilizations and cultures flourished, each adding their own threads to the nation's rich historical tapestry. In the West, the Purapeca, also known as the Tarascans, built a powerful state centered around Tzintzuntzin, developing metallurgy earlier than most Mesoamerican peoples. They were never conquered by the Aztecs and would remain an important force into the colonial era. In the north, nomadic and semi-nomadic peoples such as the Chichimeca moved across arid lands, sometimes interacting peacefully, sometimes clashing with settled societies. Though less urbanized, they played a key role in the cultural flow and eventual reshaping of central Mexico. In the Gulf Coast, the Totonacs developed rich cities like El Tajín, whose art and architecture, especially the Pyramid of the Niches, demonstrate a deep spiritual life and aesthetic complexity. A continuum of civilizations. One of the most remarkable aspects of ancient Mexican history is how interconnected and layered its civilizations were. Unlike isolated empires, the cultures of Mesoamerica evolved in a kind of ongoing dialogue, building upon the achievements of those who came before while shaping new visions of religion, society, and art. Ideas moved not just through conquest, but through trade, intermarriage, pilgrimage, and diplomacy. The feathered serpent, for example, appears in Olmec, Maya, and Toltec mythology, eventually becoming Quetzalcoatl, one of the most enduring deities in the region. Temples were rebuilt atop older temples. Calendars were refined, but always honored past cycles. Even as languages and customs shifted, the spiritual reverence for maize, the sun, and celestial harmony remained constant. The stage is set. By the early 1300s, a new power would rise in the Valley of Mexico, one that would draw from the myths, architecture, and rituals of all who came before. The Mexica, later known as the Aztecs, would build a floating empire on lakes and legends. But before their rise, the land had already seen millennia of greatness. The pyramids stood tall. The calendars turned. The gods listened. And the story of ancient Mexico, layered, luminous, and deeply human, flowed like a river beneath the surface of time. Let your eyes rest and your breathing slow as we sail gently forward in time, across the calm waters of Mexico's ancient lakes and into the storm of an age defined by conquest and change. The great cities of the past had risen and fallen, their stones whispering lessons to a new people who emerged from obscurity and legend. The Mexica, the people who would come to be known as the Aztecs, stepped onto the historical stage with determination, vision, and a divine destiny. But while they would forge one of the most powerful empires in the Americas, their story, like so many, would end with the arrival of forces from far beyond the sea. Tonight, we drift into a time of warriors and empires, of alliances and betrayals, of gods and strangers. The age of conquest had begun. The rise of the Aztecs, from wanderers to empire builders. Around the 13th century, a nomadic group calling themselves the Mexica arrived in the Valley of Mexico. According to their legends, they had wandered for generations, guided by a prophecy. They were to settle in a place where they would see an eagle perched on a cactus, devouring a serpent. This omen appeared on a marshy island in the middle of Lake Texcoco. There, in 1325, they began building what would become their mighty capital, Tenochtitlan. At first, the Mexica were humble, serving as mercenaries for more powerful city-states. But they were clever, patient, and driven. Through military skill and strategic marriages, they began rising in status. In 1428, they formed a powerful alliance with Texcoco and Tlacopan, creating the Triple Alliance, a coalition that would form the backbone of the Aztec Empire. Tenochtitlan grew rapidly, transformed by canals, causeways, floating gardens called chinampas, and soaring temples. At its height, it may have housed more than 200,000 inhabitants, rivaling the great cities of Europe and Asia in size and sophistication. The Aztec Empire, glory and expansion. The Aztecs were fierce warriors and meticulous administrators. They expanded their empire through military conquest, tribute demands, and psychological warfare. By the early 16th century, their realm extended from the Gulf Coast to the Pacific Ocean, encompassing millions of people and hundreds of city-states. Conquered territories were allowed to retain their local rulers and customs, so long as they paid regular tribute: cacao, jade, feathers, textiles, and, most importantly, captives for ritual sacrifice. Religion was central to Aztec life. The sun god Huitzilopochtli demanded nourishment in the form of blood, and large-scale sacrifices were performed at the Templo Mayor, Tenochtitlan's Great Pyramid Temple. These rituals were not acts of cruelty, but offerings to keep the cosmos in balance. The Aztecs also inherited much from earlier civilizations: the calendar, writing systems, architectural styles, and the worship of deities like Quetzalcoatl and Tlaloc. Their society was highly stratified, with nobles, priests, merchants, artisans, farmers, and slaves. Education was compulsory for children, and schools taught not only warfare and religion, but also poetry, history, and etiquette. First ripples from the east. Strange sails on the horizon. In 1517, Spanish ships appeared on the Yucatan coast. The first encounters were brief but ominous. The Spaniards were in search of gold, new lands, and souls to convert to Christianity. To many Mesoamericans, these strange men with metal skin and thunderous weapons seemed almost divine. In 1519, Hernán Cortés, a Spanish conquistador, landed on the Gulf Coast with about 600 men, 16 horses, and a few cannons. It was a small force, but history was about to tilt. Cortés made contact with the Totonacs, who resented Aztec rule and agreed to support the newcomers. He then journeyed inland to Tlaxcala, another powerful enemy of the Aztecs. Though initial battles were fierce, the Tlaxcalans eventually allied with Cortés. When Cortés reached Cholula, a sacred city under Aztec influence, he launched a surprise attack, killing thousands, sending a brutal message to allies and enemies alike. The march to Tenochtitlan, between gods and men. As Cortés moved toward Tenochtitlan, he was accompanied by thousands of native allies, and by an interpreter and cultural mediator named Malintzin or La Malinche, a Nahua woman who spoke both Maya and Nahuatl. Her role was crucial, not only translating but helping Cortés navigate the complex web of indigenous politics. When the Spaniards reached the Aztec capital in November 1519, Montezuma II, the Aztec emperor, welcomed them. Some believe he thought Cortés was the returning god Quetzalcoatl. Others suggest he was buying time or trying to avoid conflict. The Spaniards were awestruck by Tenochtitlan. With its stone temples, busy canals, bustling markets, and towering pyramids, it was unlike anything they had ever seen. But tensions simmered. The Spaniards took Montezuma hostage, hoping to control the city through him. Eventually, violence erupted. The massacre at the Templo Mayor in 1520 shattered any illusion of peace. The Aztecs rose in rebellion. La Noche Triste, the sad night. On June 30, 1520, the Spaniards attempted to flee the city under cover of night. Laden with stolen gold, they were caught crossing a causeway. In a desperate battle, many drowned or were killed by Aztec warriors. The night became known as La Noche Triste, the sad night. Cortés survived. He regrouped in Tlaxcala, built new ships, and returned to lay siege to Tenochtitlan. The fall of Tenochtitlan, a civilization undone. In May 1521, the final assault began. The siege lasted for 93 days. Famine, disease, and constant attacks devastated the Aztecs. Smallpox, likely introduced by the Spaniards earlier, had already swept through the city, weakening its defenses and morale. On August 13, 1521, Cuauhtémoc, the last Aztec emperor, surrendered. Tenochtitlan lay in ruins. The great city of the Mexica, once radiant with flowers, poetry, and ceremony, was burned, broken, and buried. From its ashes, the Spanish would build Mexico City. The colonial order, a new rule from distant lands. With the fall of the Aztecs, a new era began. The Spanish imposed their language, religion, and rule over the diverse peoples of Mexico. The Catholic Church became a dominant force, erecting churches atop former temples, converting millions, and introducing new religious festivals. At the same time, many indigenous practices survived, often hidden or woven into Christian rituals. The encomienda system granted Spanish settlers control over indigenous labor and tribute, leading to widespread exploitation and suffering. New diseases, smallpox, measles, typhus, continued to decimate native populations. Some estimates suggest that over 90% of Mexico's indigenous peoples died in the first century after conquest, making it one of the most catastrophic demographic collapses in history. But amid the darkness, cultures blended. Mestizo identity, the mixing of indigenous and European ancestry, began to form. New foods, languages, music, and beliefs emerged. Indigenous resistance also endured, sometimes quiet and symbolic, other times overt and defiant. Resistance in the shadows. Not all surrendered to Spanish rule. Throughout the colonial period, indigenous uprisings flared. From the Maya resistance in Yucatan, which lasted for centuries, to Purapeca rebellions in the West, many peoples resisted colonization in their own ways. Some fled into remote areas to preserve their traditions. Others used legal systems, petitions, and alliances to defend their lands and rights. African slaves, brought to Mexico by the Spanish, also resisted, escaping to form maroon communities, such as the one led by Yanga, a formerly enslaved man who founded a free settlement in Veracruz in the early 1600s. A wounded yet living heritage. Despite conquest, suppression, and centuries of colonial rule, the heart of Mexico's ancient civilizations continued to beat. Languages like Nahuatl, Maya, and Zapotec are still spoken. Ancient festivals and dances still fill village squares. The stories of Quetzalcoatl and Huitzilopochtli still live in murals, in dreams, and in quiet whispers. The stones of ancient cities remain. The pyramids still rise. And in them, we find not just ruins, but resilience. The night is quiet again now, and we leave behind the clash of empires and the fall of cities. Let your breath settle. Let the echoes of drums, cries, and cannon fade into stillness. Now that we've watched the great city of Tenochtitlan fall, let's continue drifting gently forward in time, into a new and unfamiliar order. The mighty empires of the past had crumbled, their temples burned, their gods defaced. But from these ashes, another kind of empire would rise, not native to this land, but ruling over it with the weight of distant crowns and gilded crosses. Tonight, we float through centuries of colonial rule, an age shaped by ambition and architecture, mines and missions, revolts and reform. It was a time when Mexico became the beating heart of Spain's empire in the New World, and when, slowly but surely, a Mexican identity began to take root in the shadows of foreign power. A new world under a foreign crown. After the conquest of Tenochtitlan in 1521, the Spanish wasted little time establishing control. The old city was dismantled stone by stone, and on its ruins rose Mexico City, the capital of the newly declared Viceroyalty of New Spain. The Viceroyalty would come to include not just modern-day Mexico, but vast territories stretching north into what is now the United States and south into Central America and the Philippines. At its heart was the territory of Mexico, rich in silver, land, and labor. The Spanish crown appointed viceroys to govern in its name. These were powerful officials, usually of noble birth, tasked with enforcing laws, overseeing trade, and protecting the interests of the empire. Alongside them were Spanish settlers, missionaries, bureaucrats, and merchants, all drawn by the promise of wealth and dominion. A society of castes and control. Colonial Mexico was a deeply hierarchical society. At the top were peninsulars, Spaniards born in Spain. Just below them were Criollos, Spaniards born in the Americas. Then came mestizos, people of mixed European and indigenous ancestry, indigenous peoples, and Africans, many of whom had been brought forcibly as slaves. This system, known as the caste system, attempted to categorize people based on racial ancestry, shaping everything from marriage prospects to legal rights. It was rigid and unjust, but over time, the lines blurred as generations of mixing continued. By the 18th century, colonial Mexico was one of the most ethnically diverse societies in the world. Yet despite this complexity, most power remained in the hands of a small elite, especially those born in Spain. Indigenous peoples were often confined to their villages, expected to pay tribute and work in forced labor systems. African slaves worked in mines, plantations, and households, and even after slavery was gradually abolished, their descendants faced continued marginalization. Wealth beneath the earth. The silver boom. One of the main engines of Spain's empire in the Americas was silver. Mexico possessed vast deposits of it, especially in places like Zacatecas, Guanajuato, and San Luis Potosí. These silver mines were so productive that they funded the Spanish crown for centuries, influencing global trade and economies as far away as China and Europe. But this wealth came at a cost. The mines relied heavily on indigenous and later African laborers, many of whom worked under brutal conditions. Accidents, mercury poisoning, and harsh treatment were tragically common. Entire communities were shaped, and often scarred, by this relentless extraction. Still, the wealth generated from silver allowed cities like Guanajuato and Mexico City to flourish. Grand cathedrals, lavish palaces, and ornate theaters were built. Universities and printing presses were established. A distinct Mexican Baroque style emerged, colorful, dramatic, and rooted in both European and indigenous traditions. Missions and conversion, a spiritual empire. Alongside silver and governance came the Catholic Church, one of the most powerful institutions in colonial Mexico. Spanish missionaries, especially Franciscans, Dominicans, and Jesuits, set out to convert indigenous populations to Christianity. They built missions in remote regions, churches, schools, and workshops that often became the nucleus of new towns. These missionaries learned native languages, translated Christian texts, and trained indigenous leaders to help spread the faith. Conversion was rarely a simple or one-way process. Many indigenous people blended Christian teachings with their ancestral beliefs, creating syncretic faiths that survived persecution. The Virgin of Guadalupe, who appeared to the Nahua peasant Juan Diego in 1531, became a powerful symbol, one that united Spanish and indigenous identities and would later play a key role in Mexican nationalism. While some clergy defended indigenous rights, others contributed to cultural erasure. The destruction of codices, suppression of native rituals, and restructuring of communities took a heavy toll. Yet, like the roots of a strong tree, much of indigenous knowledge and tradition endured, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for its time. Trade and transformation. Colonial Mexico was not isolated. It became the nerve center of a vast network of transatlantic and transpacific trade. The famous Manila galleons sailed from Acapulco across the Pacific to the Philippines, bringing silk, porcelain, and spices from Asia. In return, silver from Mexican mines flowed eastward, linking the Americas to Asia in what some call the first true global economy. Domestically, a merchant class emerged, and urban life expanded. Markets teemed with goods, maize, cacao, textiles, tobacco, and more. Cities bustled with craftsmen, artists, musicians, and scholars. Mexico became one of the most dynamic and cosmopolitan parts of the Spanish Empire. Criollo discontent and Enlightenment whispers. By the 18th century, changes were stirring. The Bourbon reforms, initiated by Spain's royal family, aimed to tighten control over its colonies. Taxes increased. Criollos, American-born Spaniards, were pushed out of key positions in favor of peninsulars. Trade regulations shifted, and local autonomy was reduced. At the same time, ideas from the Enlightenment, liberty, equality, reason, and the rights of man, began filtering into Mexico, carried by books, travelers, and educated elites. The American Revolution and French Revolution lit sparks of hope and rebellion. If distant colonies could break free, why not Mexico? Among indigenous and mestizo communities, discontent also simmered. Land dispossession, high taxes, labor abuses, and famine plagued the countryside. Many were ready to rise. All they needed was a voice to call them forward. A sleeping nation begins to stir. By the dawn of the 19th century, Mexico had been under Spanish rule for nearly 300 years. The empire had brought roads, cities, cathedrals, and universities, but it had also brought violence, inequality, and foreign dominance. And yet, from within this complex society, something deeply Mexican had begun to form, not entirely indigenous, not wholly Spanish, but a rich, living blend of cultures, languages, and dreams. A mestizo nation, shaped by conquest, faith, and survival. In small towns and great cities, in rural villages and grand salons, people were beginning to whisper about freedom. A storm was coming, not from across the sea this time, but from within. Tonight, we let the stirrings of revolution remain at rest, just for now. Let the bells of distant churches fade to silence. Let the silver mines quiet their echoes. And may the dreams of a land waiting to awaken guide us gently into sleep. Let your body rest softly as we drift into a new chapter of Mexico's long journey. The night is still, the stars are aglow, and the quiet winds of change rustle through the pages of history. We now arrive at a time when the weight of centuries could no longer be borne in silence. The Spanish Empire had ruled Mexico for 300 years, but in the hearts of many, Criollos, mestizos, indigenous communities, and Afro-Mexicans alike, a longing for justice, dignity, and freedom had begun to take root. This was not just a rebellion of arms, but of identity. It was a time of voices raised in prayer and battle cries, of hope stitched together in villages and echoed from mountain ridges. A people long ruled were ready to rise, and the echoes of their struggle still shape the soul of Mexico today. Whispers become cries, the spark of independence. The year was 1810. Across the ocean, Napoleon Bonaparte's armies had invaded Spain, throwing the Spanish monarchy into disarray. The colonies, already strained by heavy taxes and rigid social hierarchies, now saw an opportunity. In the quiet town of Dolores, nestled in the highlands of Guanajuato, a parish priest named Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla watched the events in Europe with growing concern. An educated Criollo and admirer of Enlightenment ideals, Hidalgo began speaking of liberty and justice to his parishioners, many of them poor indigenous and mestizo laborers. On the night of September 15, 1810, Hidalgo rang the bell of his church, calling the people to action. His cry, the Grito de Dolores, would become legend. Viva la Virgen de Guadalupe! Muera el mal gobierno! Viva la Independencia! Long live the Virgin of Guadalupe! Death to bad government! Long live independence! With this cry, the rebellion had begun. Hidalgo and the early revolt. Miguel Hidalgo's forces swelled rapidly. Armed with little more than farming tools and fierce determination, peasants, miners, and artisans joined his cause. They captured several key cities, including Guanajuato, where a violent siege led to the massacre of Spanish residents hiding in the Alhóndiga de Granaditas. Though initially successful, Hidalgo's army lacked discipline and faced growing opposition. The Spanish crown, fearing the rebellion's momentum, sent loyalist forces to crush it. In 1811, Hidalgo was captured and executed, his head displayed in Guanajuato as a warning to others. But the flame of resistance would not die with him. His martyrdom only strengthened the movement, inspiring others to take up the torch. Morelos and the dream of a nation. After Hidalgo's death, another priest stepped forward, José María Morelos, a mestizo with both military skill and a visionary mind. He organized rebel forces into more disciplined units and began to formulate a political vision for an independent Mexico. In 1813, Morelos convened the Congress of Chilpancingo, which formally declared Mexico's independence. The resulting document, known as the Sentiments of the Nation, laid out revolutionary ideals: the abolition of slavery, equality before the law, and sovereignty of the people. Morelos imagined a Mexico freed not only from Spain but also from internal oppression. His army fought bravely but was eventually cornered by royalist forces. In 1815, he too was captured and executed. Though both Hidalgo and Morelos had fallen, their efforts had reshaped the consciousness of a nation. Guerrillas, villagers, and hidden resistance. As the formal leaders were executed, resistance shifted to the countryside. Guerrilla fighters, small bands of rebels, and entire villages sympathetic to the cause continued the struggle in mountains and forests. Figures like Vicente Guerrero, a mestizo general from the south, and Guadalupe Victoria, who would later become Mexico's first president, kept the dream alive. Their tactics were swift and nimble, striking royalist outposts and vanishing into the hills. In these years, the rebellion became more decentralized. Communication was difficult, supplies were scarce, but the will of the people endured. Even as cities returned to royalist control, the countryside remained defiant. The unexpected ally, a shift from within. By the early 1820s, Spain's grip on the Americas was weakening. Revolutionary movements had swept across South America. Internally, the Spanish crown was strained by war and political upheaval. Then, something unexpected happened. A Spanish loyalist named Agustín de Iturbide, a conservative military officer who had once fought against the rebels, switched sides. He recognized that independence was inevitable, and saw a way to shape it on his own terms. Iturbide made an alliance with Vicente Guerrero, uniting conservative elites and rebel forces under the Plan of Iguala in 1821. The plan called for independence from Spain, the preservation of the Catholic faith, equality between Spaniards and Creoles. On September 27, 1821, the Army of the Three Guarantees entered Mexico City. The next day, Mexico was declared an independent empire. After centuries of rule, the Spanish flag was lowered, and a new chapter began. The struggles of freedom. But as one battle ended, another began. Mexico's hard-won independence did not bring peace. Agustín de Iturbide declared himself Emperor Agustín I, sparking discontent. Within 2 years, he was overthrown, and the First Mexican Republic was established. The decades that followed were marked by instability, competing factions, foreign invasions, and internal divisions. Presidents came and went in rapid succession. Some were elected, others seized power by force. Still, through all the turbulence, the idea of Mexico, not as a colony, but as a sovereign nation, continued to take shape. And at the heart of that identity was the memory of resistance, the bells of Hidalgo, the vision of Morelos, the endurance of guerrilla fighters, and the will of everyday people who dared to dream of freedom. Echoes of rebellion in the soul of Mexico. The independence movement did not free all people equally. Indigenous communities continued to face land loss and discrimination. Afro-Mexicans struggled for recognition. Social hierarchies persisted. But the very act of resistance planted seeds of possibility. The Virgin of Guadalupe, once carried into battle by Hidalgo's forces, became a national symbol, a mother for all Mexicans, indigenous and Spanish alike. The Grito de Dolores is still reenacted every September 15th, with the president ringing a bell from the National Palace. In every plaza and dusty road, in every mural and schoolbook, the story of rebellion lives on. It reminds Mexicans, and all of us, that freedom is rarely given. It is claimed, nurtured, and defended by ordinary people with extraordinary courage. Tonight, as we close our eyes and listen to the faint echoes of distant bells, let us remember that the path to freedom is not straight or smooth. It twists and turns, it falters and rises again. But even in the darkest hour, the dream of justice never sleeps. As we continue our gentle journey through the story of Mexico, we arrive now at the moments when the course of its history bent, sometimes suddenly, sometimes over decades, reshaping the nation's path and the soul of its people. These are the turning points, quiet rebellions that became revolutions, changes in power that altered identity, and decisions made in dusty rooms that rippled through centuries. Let us settle in and softly trace the pivotal events that transformed Mexico, from colony to republic, from empire to modern nation. With each chapter, may the story cradle your thoughts and draw you closer to restful sleep. Scroll the Cry of Dolores, the beginning of independence, 1810. The early 19th century was a time of great unrest in the Spanish colonies. In the small town of Dolores, on the 16th of September 1810, a priest named Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla rang the church bell. With his voice raised, he called the people to rise against Spanish rule. This event, known as the Grito de Dolores, the Cry of Dolores, is often regarded as the spark that ignited the Mexican War of Independence. Though Hidalgo was captured and executed in 1811, his actions had lit a fire that would burn for more than a decade. Others, like José María Morelos, would take up the cause, calling not just for independence but for equality, abolition of slavery, land reforms, and the rights of indigenous and mixed-race people. By 1821, the movement succeeded. Spain recognized Mexico's independence, and the long colonial night came to a close. But what followed was not immediate peace. Rather, it was a new era of uncertainty. Crown the short-lived Mexican Empire, 1821 to 1823. With independence won, the question arose, what shape should this new nation take? Surprisingly, Mexico's first government was not a republic but an empire. Agustín de Iturbide, a conservative military leader who had once fought against independence, switched sides late in the conflict and became a key figure in the final push for liberation. He was crowned Emperor Agustín I in 1822. But his reign was brief. Lacking strong political support and unable to manage the complexities of the new nation, he was forced to abdicate in 1823 and later executed. Mexico transitioned into a republic, but even this change brought more instability than unity. Balance scale, the struggle between liberals and conservatives. Throughout the 19th century, Mexico was caught in a persistent tug-of-war between two visions of its future. Liberals sought a secular state, land reforms, reduced power for the church and military, and increased rights for ordinary citizens. Conservatives favored traditional hierarchies, the continued influence of the Catholic Church, and centralized authority. This ideological conflict led to repeated civil wars, coups, and changes in leadership. In the 1850s, Benito Juárez, a Zapotec lawyer and reformer, rose as a symbol of liberal ideals. He initiated the La Reforma, a series of laws that aimed to modernize the country, reduce clerical power, and grant more rights to indigenous communities. His reforms, though important, stirred opposition, and another dramatic turning point would soon follow. France. The French Intervention and the Second Empire, 1862 to 1867. In 1862, Mexico suspended repayment of its foreign debts. Using this as a pretext, France invaded, hoping to establish influence and perhaps restore monarchy in the Americas. With conservative Mexican support, the French installed Archduke Ferdinand Maximilian of Austria as Emperor Maximilian I of Mexico. This period, known as the Second Mexican Empire, was both bizarre and tragic. Maximilian, a well-meaning but naive monarch, attempted to balance liberal reforms with imperial rule. Ultimately, he alienated both sides. After years of guerrilla warfare and with American pressure mounting after the U.S. Civil War, France withdrew its troops. In 1867, Maximilian was captured and executed. The Republic was restored, and Benito Juárez returned to power. This reaffirmed Mexico's resistance to foreign rule and marked a hard-won victory for national sovereignty. Classical building, the Porfiriato, Order, Progress, and Inequality, 1876 to 1911. After Juárez's death, Mexico entered a period of relative stability, but at a cost. From 1876 to 1911, the country was ruled, with only brief interruptions, by Porfirio Diaz, a former general who promised peace and modernization. This era, known as the Porfiriato, brought railways, industrial growth, and foreign investment. Cities flourished. The economy expanded. But beneath the surface, unrest was growing. Land was increasingly concentrated in the hands of the wealthy. Indigenous peoples and peasants were often dispossessed and forced into near slavery on massive haciendas. The political system was a facade of democracy, controlled tightly by Diaz and his allies. By the dawn of the 20th century, the inequality and repression were too great to ignore. Fire the Mexican Revolution, 1910 to 1920. In 1910, Porfirio Diaz ran for re-election once more, despite earlier promises to retire. His opponent, Francisco I. Madero, called for fair elections and an end to dictatorship. When Madero was imprisoned and Diaz declared victory, the people revolted. What followed was one of the most complex and transformative conflicts in Mexican history, the Mexican Revolution. It began as a political uprising, but quickly evolved into a widespread social and military struggle. Peasant leaders like Emiliano Zapata in the south and Pancho Villa in the north fought for land reform and justice for the poor. Governments rose and fell. Madero became president in 1911 but was assassinated in 1913. A cycle of violence, betrayal, and shifting alliances continued for nearly a decade. By 1920, a semblance of order returned with Álvaro Obregón in power. The revolution led to the Constitution of 1917, one of the most progressive of its time. It guaranteed labor rights, land redistribution, and restrictions on the power of the Catholic Church. Though implementation was uneven, the revolution marked a profound shift in Mexico's social and political fabric. Institutionalization and the rise of the PRI, 1929 to 2000. In the wake of the revolution's chaos, Mexican leaders sought stability. In 1929, the Institutional Revolutionary Party, or PRI, was formed to unite the revolutionary factions under one banner and prevent further civil war. For the rest of the 20th century, the PRI dominated Mexican politics, ruling uninterrupted for over 70 years. It promised social justice and national development, while centralizing power and managing opposition through a mix of patronage, propaganda, and sometimes repression. Under the PRI, Mexico underwent land reform, nationalized its oil industry in 1938, and launched major public works. The Mexican miracle of the mid-20th century saw rapid economic growth and urbanization. Yet, beneath the stability, democratic institutions remained weak, corruption was widespread, and inequality persisted. Ballot box with ballot, the end of one-party rule, 2000. After decades of gradual political liberalization and growing calls for change, 2000 marked a peaceful but historic turning point. Vicente Fox, of the National Action Party (PAN), was elected president, ending over 7 decades of PRI dominance. This moment signaled a new era of electoral democracy in Mexico. The transition was significant not because of revolution or violence, but because it showed the power of the vote and the maturity of the country's democratic institutions. Dove and nation always becoming. Each of these turning points, from the cry of independence to revolution and democracy, has left a lasting imprint on Mexico. The country's resilience lies in its ability to absorb change, confront hardship, and continue forward. Its history, like a great river, twists and bends, slows and surges. But it flows onward, always shaping the land it touches. And as we drift now toward rest, we remember, Mexico is a nation built not on a single moment, but on many. A land of poets and peasants, warriors and dreamers, voices raised and hopes reborn. Let your mind rest easy now, carried gently by the tides of time. While kings and generals often fill the pages of history books, the heart of Mexico's story belongs just as deeply to its people. The countless individuals whose hands tilled the land, whose songs told stories, whose feet marched for justice, and whose spirits refused to be silenced. In this segment, we listen for their voices, soft and strong, ancient and modern. We follow the threads of culture, resistance, and resilience woven by farmers and factory workers, poets and painters, mothers and musicians. Let your mind wander through the gentle rhythms of the people's voices, those who shaped the soul of Mexico not from thrones or palaces, but from fields, neighborhoods, mountains, and markets. Footprints, indigenous roots, the first voices. Long before Spanish ships arrived on the horizon, the land we now call Mexico was already a mosaic of civilizations. The Olmecs, Zapotecs, Maya, Mixtecs, Toltecs, and Aztecs each developed their own languages, rituals, and worldviews. They built cities of stone, observed the stars, composed poetry in glyphs and songs. Even after conquest, these voices did not vanish. They whispered in the Nahuatl spoken in mountain villages, in the embroidered huipiles of Maya women, in the sacred dances still performed today. Millions of indigenous people continue to live in Mexico, each group preserving unique languages and ways of life. Though often marginalized, their presence is a reminder that Mexico is not a single story, but many layered stories. Musical notes, corridos and campesinos, the ballads of the land. Throughout Mexico's rural history, especially in the 19th and early 20th centuries, the campesinos, or peasant farmers, carried their struggles and hopes in their songs. The corrido, a narrative folk ballad, became a voice for the voiceless. Corridos told stories of bandits, revolutionaries, love, and loss. They were passed from village to village, often changing slightly with each retelling. During the Mexican Revolution, figures like Pancho Villa and Emiliano Zapata became immortalized in corridos, their tales sung around fires and in cantinas. These ballads weren't just entertainment, they were resistance. They celebrated local heroes, criticized unjust leaders, and recorded history as it was felt on the ground. Even today, corridos live on. Modern forms like narco-corridos have taken shape, telling new, often controversial tales. But at their core, these songs remain a way for the people to speak their truths. Sunflower women's strength, mothers, matriarchs, and movers. Though often left out of formal histories, Mexican women have been central to the nation's endurance and change. In villages and barrios, women have long been caretakers of language, memory, and resistance. During the Revolution, thousands served as soldaderas, women who cooked, cared for the wounded, and even fought alongside male soldiers. Some led troops. Others smuggled weapons. They were often unnamed in textbooks, yet their bravery shaped the course of battle. In peacetime, women's voices emerged through literature, art, and activism. Think of Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, a 17th-century nun and scholar who defied expectations and wrote bold poetry and essays on women's intellect. Or Frida Kahlo, whose paintings gave raw expression to pain, politics, and identity. Today, women across Mexico are at the forefront of movements for equality, justice, and safety, marching in silence and in song, refusing to be invisible. Thread the threads of culture, artisans, and traditions. In the hands of artisans, the spirit of the people comes alive, in woven textiles, painted pottery, carved wood, and embroidered cloth. Each region of Mexico carries its own artistic soul. In Oaxaca, vivid alebrijes, fantastical wooden creatures, are carved and painted with tiny dots. In Michoacán, copper is hammered into elegant bowls by families who have done so for generations. In the Yucatan, henequen fibers become hammocks and bags, knotted by hand with practiced ease. These traditions are not only beautiful, they are deeply meaningful. They hold stories of migration, survival, spirituality, and joy. Passed from grandmothers to grandchildren, they are quiet acts of preservation and pride. Drum rhythm and identity, music of the masses. From the streets of Guadalajara to the clubs of Mexico City, music has always been the people's language. Genres like mariachi, norteño, banda, ranchera, and son jarocho are more than sounds, they are emotional landscapes. A mariachi's trumpet can pierce the heart. A ranchera sung at midnight can evoke generations of love and longing. A son jarocho, with its playful verses and percussive zapateado dancing, invites everyone to join in. And as time moved forward, new voices emerged. Rock en español in the 1980s gave urban youth a voice. Hip-hop, cumbia, reggaeton, and electronic fusion pulse through cities today, expressing modern struggles, migration, identity, love, protest. Each beat carries the voice of someone trying to be heard. Artist palette murals and messages, the wall as a canvas. In the wake of the Mexican Revolution, a new form of people's expression took shape on the very walls of cities. The Mexican muralist movement, led by artists like Diego Rivera, José Clemente Orozco, and David Alfaro Siqueiros, turned public spaces into visual chronicles of struggle and triumph. These murals, grand and sweeping, told stories of workers, indigenous heritage, class inequality, and revolutionary dreams. They invited the public, not elites, to see themselves in the story of Mexico. Even today, murals decorate neighborhoods across the country, often painted by local artists. They honor the disappeared, celebrate the sacred, or call for change. The wall remains a voice when other platforms fail. Loudspeakers, student voices, and street movements. Mexico's students have often led the charge in raising public consciousness. In 1968, ahead of the Olympics, thousands of students marched in Mexico City demanding democratic reforms and an end to repression. On October 2nd, in Tlatelolco Square, government forces opened fire. Hundreds were killed. The Tlatelolco massacre remains a dark stain and a rallying cry for generations. More recently, the Ayotzinapa 43, a group of teaching students who disappeared in 2014, sparked national outrage and global attention. Their absence became a haunting symbol of the violence, corruption, and impunity faced by ordinary citizens. Yet even in mourning, the people rise. Protests swell in plazas. Names are painted on banners. Candles are lit. Songs are sung. The people's voices endure. Books the spirit of the writer, literature as resistance. Mexico has produced a rich literary tradition, not just among elites but among storytellers from many walks of life. Authors like Juan Rulfo, Octavio Paz, Rosario Castellanos, and Elena Poniatowska wrote of rural poverty, cultural identity, women's struggles, and the politics of memory. Their words gave texture to Mexican life, sometimes surreal, sometimes brutally real. Rulfo's Pedro Páramo spoke of ghosts and silence in dusty towns. Castellanos gave voice to indigenous women. Poniatowska chronicled real-life tragedies and triumphs with empathy and strength. Even oral storytelling remains vital in indigenous communities, where elders pass down myths, parables, and songs, shaping worldview and grounding identity. Globe showing America's voices beyond borders, migration and memory. Millions of Mexicans have journeyed north, crossing borders in search of work, safety, or a future for their children. These migrant voices carry memories of villages left behind and dreams of return. From California fields to Chicago kitchens, they've built communities, sent money home, and kept language and culture alive across distance. In their letters, remittances, and phone calls, in their festivals and food, they've remained part of Mexico's story. Their sacrifices, often unseen, are stitched into the fabric of both Mexico and the wider world. Dove, whispers of the soul, faith and celebration. From solemn Dia de Muertos altars to joyful village fiestas, the people of Mexico have long expressed their beliefs, griefs, and hopes through ritual. Catholicism, blended with indigenous traditions, created a unique spiritual voice, one of candles, saints, marigolds, and community processions. The Virgin of Guadalupe, revered as both a national and indigenous symbol, is a mother figure embraced by millions. But spirituality in Mexico is not just religion, it is culture. It is the rhythm of bells in a small church. It is incense rising over a grave. It is fireworks on a saint's day and piñatas at a birthday. Even in hardship, these moments become prayers made visible. They speak not in words, but in celebration. Sunrise over mountains, a chorus, not a solo. The voice of Mexico is not a single note. It is a chorus, layered, rich, sometimes discordant, often harmonic. It is spoken in Spanish, Nahuatl, Mixtec, Maya, and more. It sings through lullabies and protest chants alike. It is the child learning folk dances, the abuela telling stories by firelight, the worker crafting beauty in clay, the artist painting dreams on brick walls, the student marching with a sign, the family lighting candles for those lost. All of them, all of us, are part of the ongoing song. And as you drift toward peaceful rest tonight, may those gentle voices wrap around you like a soft blanket, reminding us that history lives not only in battles and dates, but in the hearts of those who live it. History doesn't end with revolutions or declarations. For Mexico, as for many nations, the 20th and 21st centuries have brought not just triumphs, but a new set of trials. In this chapter, we gently walk through the more recent struggles, the ones faced not in dusty battlefields, but in crowded cities, in courtrooms, in classrooms, and on quiet streets. We trace the path of a people seeking safety, dignity, and justice in a changing world, shaped by power, poverty, resilience, and reform. Let the stories settle around you like evening mist, calm, thoughtful, and true. Urbanization and inequality, a changing landscape. After the Mexican Revolution ended in the 1920s, Mexico began to transform rapidly. The mid-20th century ushered in an era of modernization. Cities like Mexico City, Monterrey, and Guadalajara expanded at breathtaking speeds, drawing millions from the countryside. People came seeking jobs, education, and better lives. But urban growth often outpaced planning. Shantytowns sprang up on hillsides. Infrastructure strained under the weight of newcomers. Inequality deepened. In the sleek towers of financial districts, wealth glittered. But just blocks away, working families juggled multiple jobs and rising costs. Though some saw prosperity, many faced poor housing, limited health care, and overcrowded schools. This divide became a defining feature of modern Mexico, a country full of promise, but still battling entrenched inequality. Chart decreasing the peso crises, economic shocks and strain. Mexico's economy has weathered powerful storms in recent decades. In 1982, the country plunged into debt crisis. The government could not pay back foreign loans, and the peso plummeted. Inflation soared. Families watched their savings vanish. Another severe devaluation came in 1994, just after the signing of the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. The so-called tequila crisis led to job losses, business closures, and a bailout from the United States. Each shock rippled through homes and markets. For many, dreams of stability were postponed yet again. Yet amid hardship, informal economies blossomed. Market vendors, artisans, and small entrepreneurs kept their families afloat. The economy rebounded slowly in the 2000s, but the scars of crisis linger. Even today, economic security remains fragile for millions. NAFTA and its discontents. When Mexico joined NAFTA in 1994, it marked a new chapter, one of economic integration with the U.S. and Canada. Some sectors thrived. Factories known as maquiladoras boomed along the U.S. border, producing goods for export. But the benefits were uneven. Many small farmers, especially those growing corn, couldn't compete with heavily subsidized U.S. imports. Thousands abandoned rural life, migrating to cities or crossing the border north. While trade grew, so did questions. Who gains the most from globalization? What is lost when traditions are uprooted for jobs in far-off industrial zones? NAFTA gave rise to new opportunities, but also fueled discontent, especially in rural and indigenous communities who felt left behind. The drug war, violence, and shadows. Few modern struggles have weighed as heavily on Mexico as the fight against drug cartels. Beginning in the late 2000s, the Mexican government launched a militarized campaign to dismantle powerful criminal organizations. The results were complex and often tragic. As rival cartels clashed and military operations intensified, violence soared. Entire towns were caught in crossfire. Journalists, activists, and innocent civilians became targets. Thousands disappeared. Families waited in silence, holding photographs of missing loved ones. The cartels themselves became increasingly sophisticated, infiltrating politics, police forces, and economies. Some communities formed self-defense militias, desperate to protect themselves when institutions failed. Yet even amid horror, hope persists. Families march. Human rights groups demand justice. New leaders promise reform. And the people, weary but unbroken, continue to speak out. Corruption and reform. A long battle. Corruption has long been one of Mexico's most persistent challenges. From misused public funds to collusion between officials and criminal groups, trust in government has been deeply shaken. In the past, political power was dominated by the Institutional Revolutionary Party, PRI, which held the presidency uninterrupted from 1929 to 2000. Though the PRI brought stability, it was also associated with authoritarianism, electoral manipulation, and backroom deals. The 2000 election of Vicente Fox marked a historic shift, the first peaceful transfer of power to an opposition party. It sparked hope for a more transparent democracy. Still, corruption remained stubborn. Scandals rocked presidents, governors, and local officials. In response, civil society rose. Investigative journalists exposed fraud. Citizens demanded accountability. Today, anti-corruption efforts continue, not perfect, but persistent. Mexico's democracy is still young, still evolving, and still being shaped by the will of its people. Gender-based violence and the feminist movement. In recent years, one of the most powerful people-led movements has come from women, demanding an end to gender-based violence and femicide. Every day, an average of 10 women are murdered in Mexico. Many of these crimes go uninvestigated. The victims are often forgotten, until their mothers, sisters, and friends raise their names like banners. Marches fill city squares. Protesters wear green scarves, purple paint, and black masks. They sing. They shout. They mourn. Their message is clear: ni una más, not one more. The feminist movement in Mexico has grown into a force that cannot be ignored. It has challenged culture, questioned power, and demanded change. Though the road is long, the voices are growing louder, united by love, grief, and fierce resolve. Indigenous rights and the Zapatista Rebellion. In 1994, the very day NAFTA took effect, a group of indigenous rebels in Chiapas rose up under the banner of the Zapatista Army of National Liberation, EZLN. Wearing ski masks and speaking through a pipe-smoking poet called Subcommandant Marcos, they declared war, not against the Mexican people, but against a system that had forgotten them. Their demands were simple: land, food, schools, dignity. Their weapons were few, but their words were powerful. The Zapatistas became a symbol of indigenous resistance in a globalized world. Though conflict has quieted, the movement endures. Zapatista communities govern themselves autonomously, creating their own schools, clinics, and systems of justice. They remind the world that progress cannot leave its oldest voices behind. Migration, borders, and the search for safety. Migration has long been part of Mexico's story, both as a country people leave and a country people pass through. Mexicans continue to migrate to the U.S., seeking work, safety, or reunification with family. But in recent decades, Mexico has also become a transit country for Central American migrants, fleeing violence and poverty in places like Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. These journeys are often perilous, through deserts, rivers, freight trains known as La Bestia. Migrants face smugglers, police, and criminal gangs. Yet still they walk, with children, backpacks, and quiet courage. In response, Mexico has been pressured to act as a buffer zone. Border crackdowns have increased. Camps have formed. Human rights concerns grow. Still, many Mexicans respond with compassion, offering food, shelter, and solidarity to those on the move. Climate, land, and environmental struggles. Modern Mexico faces environmental challenges that threaten both people and tradition. Deforestation, mining, pollution, and water shortages have sparked new tensions, especially in indigenous territories. In the Sierra Norte, Yucatan Peninsula, and Isthmus of Tehuantepec, Local communities have opposed large-scale projects that endanger forests, rivers, and sacred sites. Activists, many of them women and indigenous leaders, have faced threats for defending the land. Yet they persist, often quoting old wisdom: "The earth is not inherited from our ancestors, it is borrowed from our children." Amid these struggles, movements for sustainable farming, clean energy, and ecological respect are growing, rooted in the belief that protecting nature is also protecting culture, health, and future generations. The digital age, new tools, old fights. Mexico today is deeply connected through smartphones, social media, and the internet. These tools have become lifelines for organizing, storytelling, and protest. Hashtags amplify causes. Viral videos expose injustice. Young people craft TikToks that mix humor, history, and activism. Journalists publish online to evade censorship. Families use WhatsApp to search for the disappeared. But technology is a double-edged sword. Disinformation spreads. Surveillance increases. And not all voices are equally heard. Still, the digital age offers new hope, that even in the darkest corners, someone is listening. And even the quietest voice can echo far. As the sun dips behind mountain ridges and city lights flicker to life across the valleys, we turn our gaze to the Mexico of today, a land at once ancient and young, scarred and strong, humming with life and layered with story. In this gentle chapter, we won't rush. We'll wander through bustling cities and quiet villages, sacred peaks and coastal waves, markets, murals, and melodies. The modern landscape of Mexico is not defined by struggle alone, but by the vibrant presence of its people, culture, and land in motion. Let's drift into the present, softly, step by step. Cities alive with history and hope. Today, Mexico City, the sprawling capital once built atop the Aztec city of Tenochtitlan, stands as one of the largest urban centers in the world. Over 20 million people call the metropolitan area home. Skyscrapers stretch above ancient ruins. Food stalls bustle beside colonial cathedrals. Murals tell stories of gods and workers, of revolution and rebirth. Elsewhere, cities like Guadalajara, known for mariachi and tech startups, and Monterrey, a hub of industry ringed by mountains, shape modern Mexican identity. Urban life is fast and vivid, but not without contrast. Luxury condos rise beside working-class barrios. Art galleries sit near street vendors. In every block, echoes of history linger, in cobblestones, balconies, and plazas where grandmothers sell tamales and children chase pigeons. Cities here aren't just places to live. They are living organisms, growing, adapting, dreaming. The heartbeat of the countryside. Beyond the cities lie Mexico's rural landscapes, where time flows differently. In Oaxaca, Chiapas, and Puebla, hillside villages weave together generations through farming, festivals, and family ties. Corn is still sacred in many communities. Fields of maize sway under sun and sky, just as they have for millennia. Traditional milpas, intercropping corn, beans, and squash, still nourish both body and culture. Rural life can be tough, shaped by migration, poverty, and change. Yet it is also where the soul of Mexico breathes deeply, in communal meals, market days, and timeless rhythms of planting and harvest. The countryside is more than farmland. It's a living archive of knowledge, endurance, and peace. A landscape of wonder. Geographically, Mexico is a wonderland of extremes. Towering volcanoes like Popocatépetl rumble above high plateaus. Desert dunes ripple across the Sonoran and Chihuahuan regions. Jungle canopies hum with howler monkeys and hidden ruins. To the west, the Sierra Madre Mountains sweep down into fertile valleys. To the east, the Yucatan Peninsula hides underground rivers called cenotes, once used for sacred rituals. Mexico touches both the Pacific Ocean and the Caribbean Sea. Each coastline offers something different. Surfer beaches in Oaxaca, coral reefs in Quintana Roo, and whale sanctuaries in Baja California. This land is not just scenic. It's sacred. For centuries, it has shaped, and been shaped by, the people who live upon it. A mosaic of identities. Modern Mexico is home to over 126 million people. The population is richly diverse, from descendants of the Maya and Zapotec to Afro-Mexicans in Guerrero, to mestizos, to migrants from every corner of the globe. More than 60 indigenous languages are still spoken today, from Nahuatl to Mixtec, Tzotzil, Maya, and beyond. Each tongue carries traditions, jokes, lullabies, and prayers that resist fading. Afro-Mexican communities, long erased from national stories, are reclaiming space and recognition, especially in coastal regions like Costa Chica. Mexico is not a melting pot, but a mosaic, each tile distinct, colorful, essential. Culture on every corner. Mexican culture is not confined to museums. It spills into the streets, in food, fashion, music, and celebration. Tacos and tamales, mole and pozole, spicy salsas and sweet pan dulce. Every bite tells a story of land, labor, and love. Each region has its own specialties, its own way of folding, stirring, and serving. Music drifts from guitars and marimbas. From mariachi to norteño, ranchera, and son jarocho, sound binds generations. Even modern genres, reggaeton, hip-hop, and pop, carry Mexican flavor. Color splashes across everything, embroidered blouses, woven rebozos, papal picado, painted walls. Culture here isn't hidden away. It sings in full voice. Education, youth, and change. Mexico's younger generations are shaping the nation with creativity and courage. Over 30 million students are enrolled in schools. Universities in Mexico City, Monterrey, and Puebla foster critical thought and innovation. Many youths are bilingual, tech-savvy, and politically aware. They balance tradition with modernity, celebrating Day of the Dead while coding apps, honoring abuelas while marching for climate justice or gender equality. Despite barriers, underfunded schools, inequality, and rural gaps, the thirst for education runs deep. Teachers in remote regions ride horses to classrooms. Parents save for books. Students organize for better futures. Hope, like knowledge, grows steadily here, sometimes quietly, always persistently. Man health worker health and resilience. Healthcare in Mexico is a mix of public and private systems. Urban centers offer modern hospitals, while rural areas often rely on small clinics and community healers. Traditional medicine still holds space. Herbs, midwifery, and ancestral rituals blend with biomedical care. The COVID-19 pandemic tested the system deeply, but also highlighted resilience. Communities came together to care, feed, and protect each other. Mental health is increasingly part of public conversation, especially among youth. Cultural stigmas are slowly giving way to openness and support. In every corner, health is seen not only as the absence of illness, but the presence of balance between body, spirit, and community. Infrastructure, trade, and tourism. Mexico remains one of Latin America's largest economies. It's a manufacturing powerhouse, especially in automotive, electronics, and textiles. The U.S.-Mexico border is one of the busiest in the world for trade. Tourism is a key industry too. Millions visit each year to explore ancient ruins like Chichen Itza, walk colonial streets in San Miguel de Allende, or relax on beaches in Cancun and Tulum. Major infrastructure projects, like the Maya train and the Isthmus of Tehuantepec corridor, aim to connect regions and fuel development. But they also raise questions about environmental impact and indigenous rights. As the country grows, the challenge remains: how can progress serve people, not just profit? Mexico in the world. Mexico is a global player, a member of the G20, a partner in international trade, and a leading voice in regional diplomacy. It shares deep ties with the United States, marked by both cooperation and complexity. Migration, trade, security, and culture intertwine. Mexican art, film, and literature resonate worldwide. Writers like Octavio Paz, directors like Guillermo del Toro and Alfonso Cuarón, and painters like Frida Kahlo have left lasting imprints. Even its diaspora, millions of Mexican Americans, contribute to culture, politics, and innovation on both sides of the border. Mexico's story doesn't stop at its frontiers. It ripples outward, shaping and being shaped by a global community. Everyday joys, everyday struggles. Despite the headlines about crime, corruption, or crisis, the everyday life of most Mexicans is marked by something quieter and deeper: joy, endurance, and connection. Grandparents dance at quinceañeras. Families gather for tamales on Sundays. Strangers help each other during earthquakes. Artists paint over broken walls. Farmers share seeds and stories. Even amid difficulty, there's a saying: "No pasa nada, it's okay." Life goes on. Mexico today is not perfect, but it is vivid, vital, and vibrantly human. As you sink into the stillness of night, carry with you the spirit of this place, a land of volcanoes and mariachis, cornfields and murals, protests and piñatas, heartache and healing. Mexico lives not only in maps or museums, but in every warm tortilla, every whispered legend, every smile exchanged beneath the stars. As we come to the end of our tranquil walk through Mexico's past and present, we now drift gently into its future, a future still unfolding, still imagined, still being built by millions of hands, hearts, and dreams. Hopes for tomorrow in Mexico are shaped not only by policies or leaders, but by the quiet courage of everyday people. The child learning to read in a village school. the artisan preserving ancient crafts, the young woman organizing her community, the grandfather planting trees he may never see fully grown. Tonight, we lie still and let our minds follow the pathways of possibility that wind ahead, through challenges, through change, and toward light. Let us dream softly now of Mexico's tomorrow. Environmental awakening. In the decades ahead, one of Mexico's greatest hopes lies in healing its relationship with the natural world. Climate change threatens the country with rising temperatures, prolonged droughts, and more intense hurricanes. Deforestation in the Yucatan, water shortages in Mexico City, and pollution in rivers and air are serious concerns. But hope blooms too. Across the country, indigenous communities are leading conservation efforts, protecting forests, reforesting degraded lands, and managing water with traditional wisdom. Young environmental activists, like those in Puebla and Baja California, organize cleanups, campaign for renewable energy, and speak out at international forums. In cities, green roofs are sprouting. In deserts, solar farms shimmer. On coasts, marine sanctuaries protect whales and coral reefs. Tomorrow's Mexico may be greener, not just in color, but in spirit. Social justice and equality. Mexico's future is also being shaped by its movements for justice, slow, steady, and rising like a tide. Women across the country are demanding safety, respect, and equity. Marches like those on International Women's Day grow louder each year. Calls for an end to femicide, for reproductive rights, and for political representation now echo in Congress and classrooms alike. Indigenous groups continue to push for autonomy, land rights, and recognition of their ancestral contributions. Afro-Mexican voices are gaining space in art, education, and legislation after centuries of invisibility. LGBTQ+ communities fight for visibility and protection, celebrating small victories like same-sex marriage laws in most states, and pushing back against prejudice and violence. The road is long, and the terrain uneven. But the vision, a country where all are seen, safe, and sovereign, is becoming more than just a dream. A knowledge-rich tomorrow. Education remains one of the brightest candles Mexico carries into the future. Innovators are expanding access to learning, from solar-powered schools in remote mountains to mobile libraries that travel by donkey or boat. Programs teach children in their native languages, preserving identity alongside literacy. Technology is opening new doors. Students in Chiapas take coding classes via satellite. Teenagers in Monterrey develop apps for local needs. Online platforms allow rural teachers to connect with global ideas. Education reforms aim to make learning more relevant, inclusive, and critical, not just teaching facts, but cultivating citizenship and curiosity. If nurtured well, tomorrow's minds will grow not just knowledge, but wisdom. Innovation from tradition. In the Mexico of tomorrow, tradition will not vanish, it will transform. Young chefs are fusing ancestral ingredients with new techniques, placing mole on the menus of global restaurants. Artisans are combining indigenous textiles with contemporary design, selling worldwide while keeping heritage alive. Agricultural cooperatives are blending old planting methods with climate science. Musicians sample pre-Columbian instruments in electronic tracks. Architects design homes that breathe with local materials and cultural memory. Mexico's future will not be a rejection of the past, but a reimagining of it. Innovation will come not from erasing identity, but from honoring and evolving it. Stronger institutions, deeper democracy. Many in Mexico dream of a future where governance is more transparent, justice is more consistent, and leaders are more accountable. Efforts are underway to reduce corruption, with digital tools, watchdog organizations, and pressure from civil society. The judiciary is being reformed to better serve the public. Journalists and activists continue to shine light on wrongdoing, despite danger. Elections are more inclusive, with more women and indigenous representatives taking office. Participatory budgeting, local councils, and community oversight are slowly deepening democratic practice. Though challenges remain, impunity, political polarization, and threats to press freedom, the seeds of democratic strength are there, tended daily by those who believe a better system is not only necessary, but possible. Global connection with local roots. Mexico is poised to play an even greater role on the global stage, in trade, diplomacy, and culture. It stands as a bridge between North and South America, between Spanish-speaking nations and indigenous worldviews, between tradition and technology. The Mexican diaspora, especially in the United States, continues to be a powerful cultural and economic link. Cross-border collaboration in science, business, and education is growing. And yet, amid global exchange, there is a desire to stay grounded, to protect local economies, small farmers, regional identities, and cultural heritage from being swallowed by globalization. The hope is balance, to walk forward into the world without losing one's footing at home. A future carried by the people. Ultimately, Mexico's future does not lie only in plans or policies, but in people. In the Chiapan farmer teaching his grandson to care for the earth. In the Oaxaca midwife passing on herbal knowledge. In the Mexico City engineer designing cleaner transit systems. In the teenage girl in Guerrero learning to read and dreaming of building a school for others. These small stories, multiplied across mountains, deserts, cities, and shores, they are what carry the country forward. Mexico's future is human. And humans, even after hardship, have a remarkable way of rising. Final reflections. So as we close our eyes and breathe deeply, let us carry this final image. A land of ancient pyramids and futuristic ideas. Of lullabies in Nahuatl and podcasts in Spanish. Of mezcal and microchips. Of struggle, color, flavor, and flame. A place where people hold both grief and joy in their hands, and build with both. Mexico is not yet finished. It is becoming. And every sunrise brings another chance to choose, to change, to cherish.